go as quietly as possible. Do not make a sound until I tell you to run.
On the morning of March 6, 1890, Eugene Shieffelin released the first 100 starlings into Central Park. This small act significantly impacted the balance of agricultural, ecological, and economical landscapes in North America. Starlings, Sturnus vulgaris. I'm sure you've heard of them. #1 nuisance bird in North America. Doesn't ring a bell? Let me remind you. The starling, originally native to Europe, now fly in flocks of over 1,000 called murmurs. With black bodies and white spots, these birds have managed to put 4 different native species on the endangered list. So, why is the European songbird one of the most common U.S. birds? It all starts with a man and his love of Shakespearean avians. Eugene Shieffelin, a German immigrant and pharmacist living in Bronx Borough, New York City, became chairman of the American Acclamation Society in 1877. First established in 1871, the American Acclamation Society sought to introduce flora and fauna to the American continent. These English settlers hoped to add familiarity and comfort to the New World. An article published November 15, 1877, addresses the expanse at which the Society hoped to spread their creatures. The article mentioned efforts to introduce the English titmouse, the chaffinch, the blackbird, the robin, and the skylark. As head of the Society, Eugene wished to introduce all the birds of William Shakespeare's plays. In Henry V, Shakespeare writes, "Nay, he said he would not ransom Mortimer, forbade my tongue to speak of Mortimer, but I will find him when he lies asleep, and in his ear I'll holla, Mortimer. Nay, I'll have a starling shall be taught to speak, nothing but Mortimer, and give it to him, to keep his anger still in motion." This happens to be the only mention of starlings in all of Shakespeare's works, and so it goes on March 6, 1890, Eugene and a few other men from the Society freed the first 40 of 100 starlings released into Central Park. Unlike the other birds the Society set to introduce, 16 of the songbirds survived. By perching under the roof of the American Museum of Natural History, the birds were able to make it through the rough winter. Now over 2 million starlings inhabit the land from Alaska to Mexico. Most of the introductions that were made by these societies failed miserably, Kevin McGowan of the Laboratory of Ornithology at Cornell University states. The impact of the starlings has changed agriculture, ecology, and economics here in the United States for centuries to come. Agriculture. The science or practice of farming, including cultivation of the soil for the growing of crops and the rearing of animals to provide food, wool, and other products. A survey done in 2012 states that these birds do over $189 million worth of damage in just 5 different types of fruit trees. In winter, a flock of 1,000 starlings can eat 1.5 tons of cattle feed, about $250,000 US. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, starlings are one of the top 100 world's worst invasive species. It's estimated that they do over $800 million worth of agricultural damage each year. When large numbers of these birds roost in the same area, their droppings can contaminate the soil, resulting in the release of fungal spores into the air. When breathed in, these spores can cause histoplasmosis, a respiratory illness that in extreme cases can cause blindness or even death. I spoke with Zach Myers, a dairy farmer for over 25 years. He said,
"At times we would have some calves to get sick. Of a condition that's called scours, which is sort of a more pleasant way of saying diarrhea. But they would get scours, and that would eventually they would die from it.
George Linz, wildlife biologist at the USDA National Wildlife Research Center, says what makes starlings particularly insidious is that they pick out the finest quality grain, which causes a reduction in dairy output because cows aren't getting the nutrients they need. Ecology, the branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surroundings. Starlings have been known to bully other birds out of their nests. Starlings are cavity nesters, meaning they live in small holes dug into ground or trees. The problem with this is that starlings have no ability to create those holes, meaning they must kick other birds such as woodpeckers, bluebirds, purple martins, and sapsuckers. Kevin McGowan says, "But there aren't many good holes out there, so the competition is intense, and European starlings are really good competitors. And that's the single biggest problem. They outcompete all native hole nesters." Economy, the wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services. Starling damage reports from the USDA Wildlife Service estimates $2 million a year in economical damage, but that only scratches the surface of the debt owed by these creatures. Multiple plane crashes have been due to starling activity. An aircraft accident report from July 31st, 1962, says that out of the 72 passengers on Flight 5533 departing from Boston on October 4th, 1960, only 10 survived. Out of the 10 that survived, 9 of them received serious injuries. A few seconds after becoming airborne, the aircraft struck a flock of starlings, taking out both of its engines. They're a particular problem at airports because they flock in very large numbers, and compared to other birds, their bodies are very dense. They're about 27% more dense than a herring gull, which is a much larger bird, says Michael Bazier, National Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Airports Wildlife Hazard Program. Starlings are responsible for over 6% of bird-related aircraft crashes. On July 15th, a Belgian Air Force C-130 Hercules crashed into Eindhoven Air Base in the Netherlands. Of the 41 passengers on the flight, 34 were killed, and the survivors were all severely injured. Because of their recent arrival, all starlings have a very similar genetic code. Genetically, a starling from Pennsylvania is nearly identical to starlings tested in Washington, nearly 2,500 miles away. Such little genetic variation often causes trouble for species like these, but seems to have no effect on the starlings thus far. For years, people have tried to drive starlings into extinction. They've tried everything: speakers, rockets, poison, shooting, and trapping. Starlings are the only bird in America unprotected by the law. They have been so hunted that poisons like starlicide are named in their honor. The starlings aren't truly the problem. Behaviors thought to be annoying or cruel are just basic instincts for survival. It was humans who brought starlings to this new environment. They are just trying to stay alive. An article written by Conservation Sense and Nonsense says, as the climate changes and human activities continue to encroach on the natural world, plants and animals must move, adapt, or die. The least we can do is stay out of their way. This article exhibits how starlings have changed the way people view non-native animals, and they continue to allow us as a society to distinguish right from wrong. There have been doubts about the factuality of Eugene's Shakespearean love. Some say it was a myth, a fable told by scientists and nature lovers. An article written by Duke University considers it a part of birding folklore. The release of the starlings significantly impacted the world around us, seeping into economical, agricultural, and ecological parts of everyday life. It marks the beginning of an ongoing war between native and non-native species, one of the first outbreaks in North America, one of the first lessons that taught us the dangers surrounding the disruption of the ecosystems. The Shakespeare tale may have been exaggerated, or even fabricated, but there is no doubt that the mustachioed eccentric Eugene Shieffelin was the man that released 100 starlings into Central Park. And that very bird multiplied into the disastrous, destructive pest that now terrorizes North America. It was the starling that permanently changed our economic, ecological, and agricultural growth. And it all began March 6, 1890, the day Eugene Shieffelin decided to make history.